I just finished Module 4 of the AWS Technical Essentials course, and this was talking all about storage. It started out with talking about the different types of storage: file versus block versus object. File storage is just what the operating systems like Windows and Mac use. It stores as files, it's hierarchical, you can open it, view, and edit, and all of that sort of thing. The block storage is viewed as, or rather, files are broken down into smaller sections of a fixed size, and then if you want to edit or access that that file, you would just manipulate that specific block, so it makes it a lot more efficient. And then object storage is a flat structure. Each individual item is stored as a specific object with a unique identifier, and then that tag is what's used to recall it. You can use folders to sort them, but it's not hierarchical. It's more like a tag that's presented to you so that you can see it later on. After explaining all of those things, it goes on to talk about the Amazon specific storage types. There's the EC2 instances, which are block storage, so they break it down into those smaller chunks, and that is directly attached to your EC2 instance. The best way to think about it is a hard drive that's plugged into a computer. It's really fast because it's directly attached, but it is only temporary. So if you remove your EC2 instance, all of the data on that drive is removed as well. So it's best for temporary workloads, for data that you don't really care too much about, that sort of thing. The second option is external block store, or EBS. That is, as the name implies, block storage as well. It differs a little bit from the EC2 instance store in that it's more like an external hard drive. You can still connect it directly to an instance. However, you could also unplug it from one instance and plug it into another instance, and that data is available wherever it's attached. And that is persistent storage, so even if you remove an EC2 instance with an EBS attached, that EBS remains intact and the data is all there, so it's good for information that you need to keep around for a while. The third one that they spent a lot of time on was the Simple Storage Service, or S3. That is really in-depth. This is the object storage type, so it doesn't break down chunks. It just puts them all into, they call it a bucket, and then add that identifier on it. The buckets are accessible via URLs, so anyone on the internet can access them if the permissions are set up properly. By default, they are completely private and only the creator has access to them, so security was in mind when they set that up. You can control that access to the URLs using either the IAM policies, the Identity Access Management, or S3 bucket policies. The S3 buckets are simpler, but they are larger in their size limit, so you can add more specific rules to them, but IAM rules allow a centralized management, so it's kind of a toss-up or a case-by-case decision on which you go with. Simple storage is good for long-term, relatively static information that doesn't change very often, and there are 6 types of storage classes that vary in price depending on how often you access the data or need to access the data. So you go from the S3 standard, which is general purpose storage for cloud applications, all the way down to the S3 Glacier Deep Archive, which is designed for entities like healthcare or government or finance, anyone who needs to keep archives for a really long time, like 7 to 10 years, things of that nature. And again, the pricing is different based on how long you want to store it, but you have, if you end up accessing it more often, you'll end up paying for it more. It's a balance of what you're doing. S3 is really deep. They spent a lot of time on that, and I feel like there's still much more that I could learn about that specifically, so I'll probably need to spend some time looking into that some more. But the final one, and they barely touched on this, I don't know if this will come up later in this course or if it'll come up in subsequent courses, but the Elastic File System, or EFS. This is essentially, as I understood it, the file system version of S3 storage, in that you pay for only what you use, but you can upload files and manage them. But it's a little bit like EBS in that it can be, I don't know if it's attached to an EC2 instance directly or if it's just accessed by an EC2 instance. Again, I didn't do a deep dive on that, so I'm still a little fuzzy on that, but that's the fourth option, essentially, for storage. So next up is the database module, and I've not done very much with databases, so it'll be interesting to see what they talk about in that. So we'll report back after Module 5.